Welcome everyone, please have a seat. Thanks so much for coming. We've got wanted to welcome all the people from Brazil. Thank you for coming tonight. I'm sure you'll hopefully be enlightened by this conversation. We've got some great panelists. One person got very sick from civic technology, so he's not here tonight, Jonathan. Okay. So I'm waiting for Omar, but he's not here. Oh, there he is. Omar. So Omar from Shepherd Mellon is actually hosting tonight and has provided the drinks, and he's just going to say a few words.
Hi everyone, thanks again for coming tonight. We've got a great panel discussion. My name is Omar Hashem. I'm an attorney in the corporate practice group here. If anyone's familiar with the firm, we have a broad suite of corporate matters, and our clients range from startups to Fortune 100 companies. Including that, we also handle securities advice for cryptocurrencies. So without further ado, I'll turn this over to Pemo to introduce our panel.
Thanks, Omar. And I'm going to now pass it directly to the MC tonight, which is Phil Dirty. He's a French origin journalist, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy this panel. Thank you.
Hola. Hola. Sorry, yo hablo español, pero no hablo portugués. So, I guess we don't have Christian and Jonathan, unfortunately.
Yeah, Christian's here. Where is he?
Christian is highly expected. All right. He's coming. Mike, fine.
Resurrect.
All right. So, scaling the blockchain, it was my Sunday nightmare because I spent the whole day to go through all the technical aspects of scaling the blockchain, and my proposition for tonight is going to be okay. I see Wayne is, no, you're good, Wayne.
I'm always good, man.
Thank you. I thought you were in trouble. So it's just, I'd like to cover the scaling the blockchain in different aspects. So of course we'll spend some time on the technical side of this topic, but I expect also to cover different things which are, to me, important to have the blockchain scale in the coming years. So before to do that, I'd like to have a better idea of the audience. So I have a question for you. Who knows about the blockchain in the room? Okay. So the rest don't know about the blockchain or heard about, and okay, good. So I propose to introduce the panelists and per alphabetic order. So didn't do the jobs. I think Locke, you can be the first one. What I would like to know is when you paid attention to blockchain, Bitcoin, all those stuff, and why?
Sure. So I actually first started paying attention to Bitcoin in, I think it was late 2012 or early 2013, to play online poker and yeah, just gambling and then speculating. And then got even more interested and ordered the first ASIC mining board, and I wished that I'd taken that money and just bought Bitcoin instead.
Okay, and Christian, you have the same question. What brought you to this beautiful new technology?
Yeah, that's great. A friend of mine told me about Bitcoin at some point. It was 2013. And so I thought he was crazy. And so I put $1,000 in. And I think I did the right thing. That's how I got in. And then I didn't really get why the price was fluctuating so much. So it didn't make sense to me. That's how I started digging a bit more understanding of the protocol layers and consensus mechanism and consensus protocol. And that's it. So that's my friend.
All right.
Friend.
Cool. Rosario?
Yeah, I guess, let's see, I started paying attention probably sometime in 2015. I was at a company that I had founded that was ultimately exited to an investment bank in New York, where we had built the entire FX exchange stack. And what we did for a living was basically aggregate dozens and dozens of liquidity providers and other ECNs and distribute that liquidity for others to trade. I started hearing about all these exchanges popping up, Kraken and Coinbase, and thought, since I'd never been able to find really good domain expertise out here, I thought they must be not so great. So my initial thought was to basically aggregate that liquidity and quickly realized that you can't actually, or at that time you couldn't actually do that because there was no prime brokerage to clear and settle all those transactions across exchange. And so that became the vision and the company that we built out today.
Miko?
So I'm not a super OG in Bitcoin. I actually ran across a Bitcoin checkout at my local cafe, Coupa Cafe in Palo Alto. So I decided I would mine Bitcoin in order to buy a cup of tea. I think it was 2015, so it was pretty late in the game. But what ended up happening in 2016 is basically a friend of mine who builds NoSQL databases basically came up to me and he said, "Hey, I just discovered this Bitcoin thing, and I built my own Bitcoin node from scratch, and it seems like this is going to be huge. Let's start a company." So we started Evercoin, and ever since then I've been sort of hooked. So that's me.
Yeah, if you did a tour in Silicon Valley, the Coupa Cafe is one of the legends of the region. It's a very nice spot.
They don't have a Bitcoin checkout anymore, but they did at the time.
Yeah, that's right. Palo Alto style. That's okay. Mike. Wayne. I
No worries.
No, you
You thought I was in trouble before, but I think you're the one who's in trouble. Buddy.
Definitely I'm shaking, but no, you remind me of a very good friend, so I'm sorry, Wayne, I won't make a mistake again.
No worries. So the question was, how did I first get involved in Bitcoin? I remember learning about Bitcoin pretty early on, before the price became $1. And I remember that being a big deal. But I didn't really pay that much attention to Bitcoin until I tried to buy a graphics card and found out that ATI graphics cards were about 25 to 40% more expensive than the same NVIDIA graphics card that offered the same level of performance. And when I dug into it, I figured oh my God, people are using these to mine Bitcoin. And when I found that level of specialization of hardware and software around this, I thought, wow, there really must be something more to this. This is probably going to take off at an accelerated pace. So around 2012, I built a miner. I built an initial company project really called Coindera, which was a cryptocurrency alert system, so you get price alerts to your phone. And then in 2015, we started working on Tierion, and we launched in the fall of 2015. And that's kind of my story about how I got involved. I've been, doing things ever since then. In space 24/7.
So it's very interesting. We have trading, gaming. That will be the background that brought people to the blockchain. That's what I've noticed a little bit, but that's the background, right?
I'm from open source software, 25 years, so different background.
I ran a digital agency and made marketing automation software for 20 years.
Okay, good. So, yes?
Oh, I was just gonna say, what really got me excited about it was looking at arbitrage opportunities across different exchanges. I actually wrote a thesis on market efficiency in the Bitcoin market, and then actually created a trading algorithm based on that. And then actually had to write my own 1099B, my tax return. And then I decided I'm never gonna trade again.
Yeah. So no one to disrupt the bank industry, right? No, it's not about it, right?
Well,
Yes?
I mean, back offices might get in trouble in the future.
Rosario?
No, I mean, I think there's a lot there to be disrupted. I think it goes way beyond just post-trade reconciliation and cost reduction. I think that's an element of it. I think that's for sure gonna happen. We see that happening across all the banks, but I think there's much more to it, especially if you're a believer in where we're going with digital securities.
Okay, so the next question I'd like to ask you is to give you a chance to speak more about your company, the news, and we will keep that for the end, but how do you scale the blockchain, you guys, with your company?
I guess you talking to me, I'll go first.
I'm talking to everyone because to give the chance to say a bit more about the company that
Sure.
you guys are running.
Yeah, so I'm probably one of the few in the room that is involved in sort of private permissioned ledger systems. So we're not, our way of scaling the capabilities of public blockchain was basically to use it as a final settlement layer only, and to build an enterprise solution that is essentially run by custodians. So we built a multi-custodian blockchain network. We have a solution we give to custodians. It lets those custodians hold digital assets, fiat assets, really anything, could be natively digital securities, non-natively digital securities. The solution we give to the trading entities lets them ask the custodians to essentially tokenize those assets onto a custodial blockchain ledger. Those assets are then freely tradable with anybody in the network with no counterparty or settlement risk, and they're provably there at the custodian and incorporated into the actual real-time pre-trade risk and the entire execution pipeline. We effectively do a trade in our world is effectively an atomic swap that we're able to do between any custodial asset ledger and any other custodial asset ledger.
Wayne, you have a mic. How do you scale
How
the
do you
blockchain?
scale? How do you scale?
Yeah. How do you scale the blockchain with your company?
Yes. We don't. Because blockchain shouldn't scale. I know that's a controversial statement, but so let me qualify that and I'll explain a little bit about what we do. So you have to ask yourself, the first blockchain was Bitcoin. And the reason we have blocks is because of proof of work. The system needs a way, without any authorities, to come to an agreement about what is the next set of transactions to add to the ledger, all right? So in order to do that, you needed to make it expensive to add a new set of transactions to the ledger and expensive to add a transaction to the system because it's permissionless. And so proof of work essentially burns electricity to prove that you've done a certain amount of work to be able to add that next block to the ledger. And the expense of doing that and the hash-linked list of all of these blocks creates a way for a high level of security and a high level of cost to be able to recreate all of that. Nobody can just come by and remake the Bitcoin blockchain without doing all of the computing power and burning all the electricity that historically has been put into it. So that's why we have blocks. And now, what it's good for, so let me go back into 2014, 2015. I had been making marketing automation software, and our business model was a performance-based business model. So if people used our software and our platform, we made money on a percentage of growth of online sales or a number of leads. And so our customers were always naturally suspect of the numbers that we were reporting to them because they had to pay a bill based on the veracity of those numbers. So I thought to myself, well, maybe what I can do is take some of these, proof of existence type technologies that are out there for Bitcoin and make them scalable and applicable to the high volume of data that's going through our system. And that was really the starting point. So what we did is myself and some other people, we came up with a protocol called Chainpoint, which is a very simple way to link data to the Bitcoin blockchain and generate a timestamp proof. It's good for verifying the integrity of data, an audit trail for a business process, and we built a SaaS application initially that allowed people to do this. And so the advantage there is that by linking things to Bitcoin, there's an economic incentive to persist that linkage in the data in the Bitcoin blockchain around the world. And people can have a high degree of confidence that that information, that linkage, if you will, has not been compromised. So the problem that we solve, or that people solve with our technology, is being able to prove to other people that like a data set hasn't been modified, a set of log files hasn't been modified, a business process occurred in a particular order, or a digitally signed document actually existed at a particular point in time and was signed at this point in time. And all of that happens off-chain. We have millions and millions of transactions going through our system every day, and we only publish one transaction to the Bitcoin blockchain per hour for the whole network. So all of the scaling, if you will, from a technical perspective, sits off-chain, because if you have a blockchain, a real blockchain like Bitcoin, it shouldn't scale. It should remain expensive, and it should remain small. And we've had lots of fights over this over the past couple of years, but I think people are finally starting to resolve this. Now, people are also calling other types of applications blockchains. And back in the early and mid 90s, when I was getting started, we had the internet, intranets, and extranets. Intranet was using the internet protocol inside your company to make an application. Extranets were a way to collect with your suppliers and everybody else in the world. That was a part of your business network. I see blockchain being used to basically describe extranets, using cryptography as a way to verify either the transfer of assets or have secure interactions with other trusted parties, for the most part, semi-trusted parties inside a network. I don't think the word blockchain is going to change. I just think it's changed, it's not going to go away, but it has changed fundamentally from what it was back when I first got involved with Bitcoin. So, blockchain ain't what it used to be.
I will have some questions for you after. So, Locke, how do you scale the blockchain?
Sure. And, I think following on Wayne's point there, blockchain is kind of a nice buzzword for really a distributed database with an economic incentive for people to all uphold the same exact data, right? Redundantly and immutably storing that data. And do you guys use hashes?
Yes.
And so we, there's a lot of talk around technical scalability, increase block size, make blocks get confirmed faster, et cetera. But what we really focus on at NuID is empowering all the really exciting possible use cases that could utilize blockchain to be able to actually do so. And so you can think about, for instance, digitizing assets like real estate titles, equities, et cetera. And you need an identity layer, and you need the actual individuals or entities to be able to be represented to associate those assets with, for that to ever really work, right? Because if you just have a public key and a wallet sitting on a computer, and you have an equity token stored on that wallet, and your house burns down, that equity disappears. Just like a lot of Bitcoin have been completely, have disappeared and become irrecoverable. And that fundamentally doesn't work for digital assets, right? And so what I focus on, and my team focuses on at NuID, is actually building out the foundational authentication layer to provide what we call trustless authentication for trusted identity, to help allow applications and exciting new services to exist and use the blockchain. Because right now we really just have a lot of people speculating on cryptocurrencies, and that's not what's going to just scale the blockchain indefinitely.
Christian, how do you scale the blockchain with your company?
Yeah, I'll keep it short. Basically, two ways. One went with IBM blockchain on the cloud. So that's pretty scalable. It's a permission-based blockchain, and it's scalable. You use Kubernetes, so it's something that allows us to kind of serve small clients and big companies as well. Second way is that as we work with large files. What Blockstar does, we're basically taking brands and we're using branded virtual goods. Think about like a Nike shoe, a virtual Nike shoe, or a digital Ferrari, a virtual car. I make them available inside video games and digital experiences. Some of these files tend to be pretty big, right? There are live objects that needs to be alive and working inside these games. So what we do, we basically hash them off. So we don't necessarily store it on the blockchain. We have an hash. It's a reference point that allows them to kind of pull them from outside storage. So that's the way that we do it.
Miko.
To me, like, the question is a difficult one because ultimately there really are three concepts of scaling. So I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page here. So to me, what I've seen what's called layer 0, layer 1, and layer 2 scaling solutions. So really the mindset around scaling is technical scalability. So when people talk about scaling, they're really talking about how do you make smart contracts or how do you make transactions faster, right? That's really the mindset of scaling, right? So, just to lay it out, like the notion of a layer 0 solution is basically some kind of a network protocol that speeds up actual communications between nodes, right? So that's one approach, right? Layer 1 solution is typically a consensus oriented, right? So basically allows traditional kind of distributed, I think you refer to them as essentially databases, how do they achieve consensus faster, so that's kind of the layer 2 scaling. Typically what you find that most of the scaling involves playing with trust, which is why I think that Wayne was saying that scaling shouldn't happen. And then, so it plays with trust and centralization, and then obviously layer 2 scaling. And layer 2 scaling is basically things like payment channels, and things where, again, you play with trust, right? So you're playing with trust and effectively moving things off-chain, or you're moving them into sort of a so-called sidechain where you have this kind of Merkleizing index that enables you to maintain consistency between the main chain and the sidechain or off-chain. But the point I'm trying to make is that, these are the basic three approaches that I've seen, right? Which is layer 0, layer 1, and layer 2 scaling. Just to give you all kind of a basic taxonomy of scaling solutions, technical scaling solutions. But what I mean by playing with trust is basically what Bitcoin proves is it proves that lack of trust is expensive, right? So if you don't trust anyone, if you trust 0 parties, then you're going to go down to 7 transactions per second, and you're going to burn a lot of electricity. And that's the result. It's a result of I don't trust anyone. The thing that's interesting is if you move the slider of trust to I can trust one party, then what you have is you have the Oracle database. And I can give you as many transactions as the normal business application wants, right? Because I can go in memory, I can buy like exadata, I can buy like big fat boxes, terabyte of RAM, I can give you billions of transactions. So if you can trust one party, you're done. Like you're basically done. So there's all kinds of complicated things like, in EOS you need to trust 21 parties. So there's all these different people putting the slider in different places, right? But I think if I got your message right, Wayne, like you should keep the slider at 0, and you shouldn't actually trust. If you're going to use a blockchain, you might as well trust no one and get the most benefit. So I think that's what you were implying. So so to me, I just wanted to hit that as sort of those are the core basic principles, and anything that increases the speed ought to decrease the trust. Like, that's how else could it work?
Can I just add to that too a little bit? I mean, I think that we're going to see all of those things that you mentioned, the entire spectrum there, continue to exist, right? Because there's going to be some sort of data that people want, guaranteed, immutably stored. They're going to be willing to spend a lot of money to have, ultra redundant storage across, a proof of work based blockchain like Bitcoin, right? But a lot of data you don't need on that. You can do that on the side chains, and then you can even hash a side chain and put that into the blockchain, right? So we're going to see a lot more kind of cross-chain referencing and data publishing, I think, depending on the type of data.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I basically agree with that, but some domains actually dictate that you necessarily, in order to achieve the kind of scalability you need, you have to trust some parties. And so for example, in an institutional trading context, it's not unreasonable to trust the custodian that's holding your assets, or to trust the DTCC, or the whatever the case may be. So I would argue that a public ledger system, even if we were to achieve some of the things that people are trying to achieve with scalability in terms of transaction throughput, when you have sort of a distributed system like that crosses geographies, you're already at sort of a transaction. You have a latency issue that will directly impact how usable it is to incorporate blockchain into a real-time trading context. And so what I mean, and that's why you see a lot of solutions pursuing a post-trade recordation sort of style of applying blockchain or distributed ledger to the problem. But you do get some benefits from taking blockchain, even though it's maybe not as, it's not as perfect as Bitcoin might be, in terms of having non-repudiation mechanisms, right? So if you think about a system like ours, we're not using it just for recordation. You actually have assets that custodians have written to a custodial blockchain ledger that are provably there, cryptographically provably there, that are incorporated into real-time pre-trade risk, so that you can actually transact with parties that you don't trust in an anonymous fashion. Your only trusted party in the network like that are the custodians, so your only risk is really custodial risk, and that is something that works in a capital markets trading use case, but doesn't work. But it wouldn't. You cannot get there with a public ledger system. You need the determinism around the transaction times. I mean, you're talking about measuring things, different parts of the trade life cycle in single-digit microseconds, right? So you have some small number of milliseconds with determinism that dictate whether or not it's usable for a real-time trading use case.
And I think that applies to cryptocurrencies as well. I mean, who here has tried to use Bitcoin ATM, right? If a block isn't going to be confirmed for 24 hours, say the mempool is 20x what a block size can be, you might go try and withdraw some fiat and have to come back the next day to the ATM to actually get your cash. So there's a lot of issues around that latency.
Miko started to qualify a little bit the different aspect of the problem of scaling. Because there's the software aspect, there's the hardware, there's the private blockchain, the public blockchain, the protocol. I'm just thinking about the people in the room still. Interested to understand more, how can we kind of summarize the major technology issues that the blockchain has to really be more efficient?
I would say it's not, to me, it's not just a technology issue. It's more than that. If you think about the internet, things didn't really took off back then until people got comfortable and kind of type in their credit cards and start kind of purchasing things online with the SSL protocol, right? The little golden lock at the bottom. So I think it's more of a three-step process where as people get more comfortable with the blockchain, more attentions and money will actually be employed in the scalability aspect, which eventually will allow us to kind of have a scalable system. But probably most of Maslow hierarchy of needs, 7 steps of Maslow. No? Yes? No? So the first step is basically safety and security, and that's how people move, right? If you know that you're not going to be dead, killed tomorrow, right? You're actually comfortable to kind of play with the game. And that's what I think, until we're going to have a secure system of the blockchain that goes from wallets to exchanges all the way down to whatever it is in the entire ecosystem, people are not going to be comfortable and really going to spend their time playing, understanding how blockchain works and what it's needed for. Once you have safety and security, you start thinking about stability, right? So once you're safe, you start spending a little bit of money in, but you can't buy a cappuccino today or frappuccino for $5 today, and tomorrow is going to cost you $50 because of the volatility, right? So that's when stability of the coin is going to become very important. And once you have security and stability, now you start thinking about scalability. That's when the masses will start moving, start spending Bitcoin to buy a frappuccino, to buy groceries, to buy gas. And so at that point, I think we're going to have a lot more attention, a lot more money poured into the infrastructure needed for scalability that will become scalable.
Sure. We will come to that because I think I'm very curious about the mass adoption of the blockchain, but let's, if someone has to say about just to summarize a bit, the technical aspect of where is the big problem, if it's more on whatever.
I wanted to respond to that. To me, like, it's very, very dependent on what you're trying to do, and so I'm very much kind of like a sort of a multi-coinist, right? So because the way I look at it is it's application dependent. People have this kind of like really weird requirement that Bitcoin be like an all singing, all dancing thing because they don't actually understand what money is, right? Like money is software. So, money is not data. Money is, like, people think money is data. Like, it's like, wow, that's amazing, right? It is not data. Money is not data. Money is software. And if you reason about money as being software, then you have to actually now understand that money's a bunch of different softwares, right? Like the credit card processing is one software. Debit cards is slightly different software. Gift cards another software. Cash register, point of sales another software. They're all different software. So like the idea that there's one all singing, all dancing Bitcoin software that handles every monetary use case that there is misunderstands like fundamentally what money is, and it misunderstands what software is, and it misunderstands what Bitcoin is. So like, I just don't think that there is an all singing, all dancing case for money. Like, there's many packages. So because there are many packages, like I feel like, for example, payment use cases will be covered by Line Link, Kakao Clayton, Telegram Ton, Facebook Libra, and whatever those crazy letters were for the People's Bank of China coin that they're going to launch with like WeChat and Alibaba.
DC.
There's a bunch of letters, right? But the point I'm making is that those will do payment. And why should Bitcoin have to? Like, it just feels like you're asking for a whole lot of things that aren't needed.
May I just comment on that? Nobody wants Bitcoin to sing and dance.
Yeah,
Nobody wants to sing and dance. That could get ugly. The people who are working on Bitcoin, who are passionate about it, they want it to do one thing well, right now. They want it to be a reliable, censorship-resistant store of value. The whole point of Bitcoin is to have money or a value transfer network or a store of value that is outside of the purview or control of any government or any trusted authority. Nobody wants to do fish notarization on Bitcoin. Nobody wants to do other types of applications on top of Bitcoin directly because it is expensive. It is intentionally slow and expensive. However, if you take something like Hyperledger Fabric, which is a popular blockchain platform, and we wrote something at Tierion where with Hyperledger Fabric, you had a set of trusted validators who validate all the transactions, all the data that's happening in between people. And what we do, we built something that you periodically take a hash of a set of transactions and you link it to the Bitcoin blockchain, and you get back a proof that gets added to a log inside the system. And what this does is it allows you to have the confidence that those validators just didn't go back and just re-sign a bunch of data because if they did, these proofs would be invalid. So in a very broad sense, you're inheriting the security of the Bitcoin blockchain into that application. I think that something like, so you're right, Miko, about talking about you have base layer protocol, and then you have layer 2 protocols. Chainpoint is a layer 2 protocol. Lightning, which is a way to do fast payments off-chain on Bitcoin that settle on-chain with Bitcoin eventually, and have payment channels and things like that. That's a layer 2 protocol. There are people paying for things with Lightning today. We're doing some work at Tierion with Lightning. There's a promising future for this, but you have to build at a base layer, and you have to layer things on. People are trying to make Bitcoin more efficient. They're trying to make the signature mechanism that you use to sign transactions to be less, to consume fewer bytes on chain. People are very concerned in Bitcoin about something like called the cost of node operations. They want the node to be inexpensive to run so that it doesn't get, so if you double the size of the blockchain or 10x the size of the blockchain, you're not able to run it on small devices. You have a predictable future with Bitcoin right now about the rate of growth of the Bitcoin blockchain. And so people are trying to make it do everything. It's not appropriate to do everything, but the word blockchain is just being applied to a whole host of things, some of which are entirely unrelated. But it all comes back to, Bitcoin, people's excitement about it, and then I guess they just want that excitement to keep carrying forward.
Yep, they don't want to be the greater fool, right? I mean, I think Bitcoin, is like a brand name, right? And that's what people associate with quote unquote blockchain. And at the end of the day, Bitcoin is, the original blockchain. It's one of the most dispersed in terms of the actual, coin holdings. So you're not, at risk as much for market manipulation and whatnot. But at the end of the day, the Bitcoin blockchain is really bad at payments, right? And as Miko was saying, I think that, we're going to see other forms of distributed database systems with economic incentive structures that are much more efficient for payments. And we're going to see interoperability between these different chains. And at the end of the day, the proof of work system, as Wayne was explaining, is, it's expensive, and that is by design, and it's to really, guarantee that you're going to be able to, trust this network over time, because people are going to be upholding these nodes, and people are going to have to think about, how much data they're going to want to pay to store on it, right? Which is usually very little. So I think we're going to see just a lot of different chains. Bitcoin probably will be around for a long time, but I'd probably disagree that it will ever be stable in terms of its value, unless you trust somebody like a monetary authority.
I think Bitcoin will be stable because it already is stable. One Bitcoin is always worth one Bitcoin.
Fair enough. It's the dollar that's not stable.
Yeah, I think I basically agree with all of that. I mean, it's to me, it's a store of value, and any of the public ledger systems are a great sort of final settlement layer. But the way we scale on the enterprise side was, we looked around. Think about a blockchain ledger. There's really an I/O problem there, right? So if everybody's sharing a single ledger, you have obvious bottlenecks. And so the way we approached it was we built a ground-up blockchain stack, same transaction model as Bitcoin. We implemented it in Java, but it's a multi-ledger architecture. So every custodian in our network has a unique asset ledger per asset per custodian. And so you get this kind of very natural, logical sharding, but sharing the common protocol, so you can still do an atomic swap and create guarantees that we're able to create when you transact between two custodial ledgers.
Oh, can I just add something, just kind of clarify, because I think we'd be confusing a few things. I hate to talk about blockchain. In reality, I think when we say blockchain, it's not necessarily correct, right? We should be talking about DLT, decentralized technologies. You have blockchain, you have sidechain, you have DAGs, you have a bunch of stuff. So we should correctly name it as DLT. The second thing is that blockchains are not cryptocurrencies and vice versa. Cryptocurrency live on blockchains, but blockchain might actually, DLT, pardon me, I'm actually mistaking myself. DLT can actually have multiple use cases behind payments, right? And so when we talk about scalability, I'd like to be precise on what we talk about, right? In terms of, are we talking about scalability of payment transactions like Visa, for example? Or are we talking about a source of other different transactions, like, for example, storing real estate transactions, or even media informations, like videos and music, right? So I think I just want to kind of put a word of caution in terms of qualifying the statements, that's all.
We will come to it. Locke?
I was just going to, expound upon that and agree totally that, payments are just, one of the first use cases of a blockchain, right? Of distributed ledger technology, and I think we're going to see multiple other use cases, right? For storing data, distributing data, and payments will just be one part of it.
I think one thing I wanted to address, kind of on behalf of the audience, is sort of why. Why scale, right? I think Wayne hit the nail on the head where it's basically like, well, if you want a blockchain, you want Bitcoin, then the slowness is actually a feature, and it's a great feature, and it's, so therefore, why should we increase it? What we're seeing, for example, on things like EOS is that EOS is very fast, and so it produces lots of blocks very quickly, and one of the problems is storage. So what you're finding with a lot of the block producers is that they're actually not storing the whole blockchain anymore, which kind of messes around with immutability, right? So to me, that's an issue. And one of the things that's fascinating about that issue is it turns out that proof of work is dependent on the thermodynamic principle that converting a 0 to a 1 costs energy. And if converting a 0 to a 1 didn't cost energy, then proof of work would fail, and vice versa. making a 1 a 0. But the second law of thermodynamics also says that keeping a 0 costs energy, and keeping a 1 costs energy. And so storage actually hasn't been properly incentivized, by the network. So, because we haven't properly incentivized storage, we really ought not to grow the blockchain faster than we should. So to me, blockchain, whatever you want to call it, but the thing that I really want to get at is I want to get at why? Why scaling? Why do people want to scale? And I think the best place to look is to look at Ethereum. And the fact that we're looking at Ethereum is actually great. And the reason why I'm excited about the fact that we're all looking at Ethereum, the thing that's amazing is people are going, oh wow, Ethereum's slow, it's terrible, right? Okay, so let's take a different analogy. Like, whenever Apple announces like a new iPhone, like if you go out in front of an Apple store and you see a huge line of people like waiting to give Apple $1,000, right? And what are they going to say? They're going to say, "Oh, Apple is slow, right? It's Apple is slow at dispensing things that I want to pay for." That's what people are saying about Ethereum, right? They're basically, because every single transaction on Ethereum costs gas, it costs money. So the idea that there's an economic payment that's occurring and people can't push money into Ethereum fast enough for their liking is a good thing, right? So I just want to make sure everyone understands that, because everyone's like, wow, Ethereum's slow, that's a bad thing. It's like, no, that is a good thing. If you see a big line outside an Apple store, people really desperately trying to shove money into Apple, that's good for Apple, right? So I just want to make sure people understand that. So the reason why Ethereum comes up, though, is it's the depends on what you're trying to do problem, right? Which is, if you're trying to create a peer-to-peer electronic cash, which isn't quite what Bitcoin is, but if you're trying to create one of those, then you should have one set of properties. And if you're trying to create a world computer, which is what Ethereum purports to be, which it isn't either, you should have a different set of performance characteristics. So that's kind of what I'm poking at.
And those costs too kind of force people to actually think about efficiency, right? In terms of what they want to compute, what they want to store. But
That's great.
right, which is exactly. But one interesting aspect of scalability also is the fact that as time goes on and transactions continue to occur, these distributed ledger databases are always growing, right? And so something we're going to have to continue to face is, what do you do about that, right? Are you, is everyone always going to hold a full node in 100 years from now?
Gonna get interesting.
Thank you for.
Can I just add a comment?
Well, you can have my question is waiting, but you're the panelist, so
Thank you.
You have the priority.
So we're talking about Ethereum. Ethereum is almost prohibitively expensive for businesses to run. If you have a very high-powered computer and you connect to the Ethereum network, it can take days if you want to sync up the entire chain. And if you told somebody that you were going to design a computing system, a world computer, by creating a distributed log file in which you could embed JavaScript-like scripts, and every single copy, every computer would replicate every copy of that log file and execute every single script. If you went to a traditional tech conference and said, we're going to build that, it's going to be the world computer, and people up here are laughing already because it is beyond insanity. It's like saying that you're going to build an email system where your email server is going to process every single email message that is sent by everybody ever around the world, and it's going to hang on to them forever. I wrote an article in 2016 called "Who Pays for the Decentralized Web?" where we talk about all the lack of economic incentives to hang on to data forever for things like distributed storage or the Ethereum blockchain. And I don't see there being a lot of answers to these problems. I think people are trying to solve an impossible problem in this particular case. I think that if you go out in the world right now and you say, what are people doing with blockchains? The answer is not much. There are some things that people are doing that are interesting. A company that I invested in called TokenSoft, they created a standard called ERC 1404, which is a way for you to issue securities on a blockchain in a compliant way. Now, securities transactions for private businesses are small and infrequent, and the fact that you can have them on a public ledger is, somewhat useful. And that is a different use case besides payments that might have some applicability into the future. And there's other solutions with Ethereum like sharding and other ways that we're trying to, or not we, but the world, the community, is trying to be able to improve the scalability. But I feel like as we grow, we're progressing back towards traditional system designs for distributed systems that don't really have any new serious innovations in them. So if you want to build an application for supply chain, or you want to do something in trade finance or anything else, there are ledger-style software that we now call blockchains that exist. Find a really good one and build it. But I think that if you're trying to scale up the base layer blockchain to do all of the things, like you were saying earlier, it's just not going to work. There are other layer 2 protocols like Lightning Network and Rated, which is the equivalent of Lightning on Ethereum, and several others that may provide some of the capabilities. But ultimately, you cannot scale a public network to be able to do all the singing and dancing, all the songs, every dance move for all time.
All right. I was checking the news, and Nico, thank you for introducing Ethereum. I saw that the project scale raised 17 million. So it's a layer 2 platform, blah, blah, blah. And I would like to understand how it works in terms of who are the investors behind all of your companies, who are the typical companies, VCs putting money into this company, to understand a bit what's the landscape of the financing behind all those companies, like Ethereum or others.
I'm one of my hats is I'm a professional investor in venture role. I can give you kind of the quick snapshot of the psychology, right? Which is that there was a time when kind of layer 1 investment was pretty fashionable. And I think one of the problems with the layer 1 investment is that people would really have super high valuations and they have super big raises for these kind of like super speculative projects that would like ship sometime in like many years from now. Professors would be like,
Or disappear.
Yeah, so-called professor coin type projects. And what ended up happening was that this kind of almost broke the venture capital machine in Silicon Valley because it just doesn't behave like anyone expected, right? And so because of that, I think right now the layer 1 solution investment paradigm for VCs is kind of broken and essentially stopped, right? So layer 1 scaling is kind of done. So what it means that Silicon Valley has made their bets. So there's really maybe 20 different layer 1 scaling solutions, and that's all we're going to have from the venture world. There may be super amazing solutions coming out of academia, but they won't be quite as well funded. So that's what I think. Obviously, there's additional layer 0 solutions being funded, and there's additional layer 2 solutions being funded that are application dependent. But that's my take.
Any other who's pushing money into your company? Who are the investors?
So our investors are Blockchain Capital, Digital Currency Group, and Fenbushi, and we raised money back in 2015. And at the time, there weren't many people who had our product. We actually built a working product and got customers before we raised money. And it's, today, the landscape has definitely evolved quite a bit. Blockchain Capital and Digital Currency Group are the number 1 and number 2 investors in Bitcoin and blockchain companies by deal volume. And so they're making lots of smaller bets, traditionally into a lot of companies. I remember Barry Silbert, who's the CEO of DCG, saying there was a time where he just found every decent exchange out there and made investments in a bunch of exchanges. Since he didn't know, whether the exchange in India was going to work or whether Coinbase was going to work or whatever, but it was sort of a sector bet. It wasn't really a spray and pray approach, but people there's definitely been theses. One of the major theses that came along that was pioneered by Blockchain Capital was the idea of a security token. At Blockchain Capital, we issued the first security token. And at the time, there was talk about liquidity. As an investor in a venture investor, you usually don't get liquidity until 7 to 10 years out, typically. But now there was the opportunity to get liquidity earlier. Now, regulatory things have changed that quite a bit and slowed that down. But that was part of that was the meme of the moment for a while, maybe late 2016, early 2017. There are a lot of professor coin projects. That's become a term that you hear a lot. And if you have a good business that happens to use blockchain or Bitcoin or any of these public currencies, you're going to be able to get investors. You're going to be able to raise some capital and probably have a decent shot of being able to make that work. But if you don't have a practical business use, if you can't articulate to your investors who is the user of our product, what is the channel by which they're going to acquire our product, how are we going to price it, things like that, then you're not likely to be able to raise money in this environment. Back in 2017, those things were not at all a concern, and people were just putting money into all sorts of projects, but that is over.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that was a huge hype wave, right? People wanting to basically buy a token and then sell it for a lot more, a little bit further down the road. And I think that it's actually really good that we've seen that kind of die out. And I heard a stat recently, actually, that like in Singapore, for instance, there's actually more money raised via token issuances, ICOs, than in IPOs this last year. Most of which were related to blockchain-based companies. But I think that, as we work out a number of issues around, KYC and anti-money laundering laws and regulatory issues, and I would argue, identity being a big piece of that, we're going to see businesses that aren't related to blockchain be able to actually raise capital via digital security. Using a token, right? Exactly, and so that's a big part of scalability, I think, as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the environment has definitely changed, probably for the better. It's probably for the better of the industry, but it is a challenging environment. So we've raised about 17 million to date, and used that to fund an almost 4-year pure technology build out before we actually were able to go live. It's a quite big infrastructure play, and that's been super challenging. All of our investors have been, basically markets experts. We have no traditional venture capital. It's been, university endowment money, indirectly through a hedge fund that invests on their behalf. It's been, big asset managers like Polar and Fidelity. It's been guys like Susquehanna and Cowen, and, people that are in the markets and understand sort of the deep infrastructure that we're working on. We haven't been able to figure out how to make it resonate with the general Silicon Valley venture community, unfortunately.
Really quick to add to that, what's funny is I spent way too much time trying to figure out how we can do an ICO, right? To raise money during the big hype wave of token issuances, because you see these companies raising $20, $40, $100 million, right, with a token, and after thinking about it more and more, it's like this isn't really real, right? And there's going to be this regulatory crackdown, et cetera, et cetera. And so we actually ended up raising, our capital just through traditional convertible notes with angel investors and institutions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Granted, we're not a token-based company.
Christian, you want to add something?
No, I mean our
Because I have
investors
a lot of
are.
questions.
It's okay. I mean,
Go ahead,
I mean,
go ahead.
yeah. I mean, our investors are angel. We're negotiating a seed round from a big seed fund right now. But I would say, the type of investors that invest in these companies are any investor that invests in good businesses, right? So if you have clients, if you have revenues, right? If you have technology that works, but as opposed to 2016, 17, 18, right? It's less about the technology, it's more about the attractions. I think any investor, would invest in such a business.
Going fast. Casper Labs raised money recently. I did my job. And mostly to hire developers. Is it hard to find the talent you need inside of a company to be with the right staff you need?
Competency is rare, just
Yeah.
I mean, the thing that's really interesting becomes, like, when you look at Casper, like the origins and history of Casper are essentially like, what happened was if you look at Ethereum, right, like there were really two proposals, and the two proposals basically were for essentially proof of stake, which is different from proof of work, right? So the two proposals are basically one from Vlad Zamfir and the other one was a proposal from Vitalik, right? So what happened essentially was that our chain was actually sort of the forked version that went with the Vlad Zamfir proposal, but it turns out that that governance structure of our chain was kind of really just pretty hopeless, and so that project failed, and then Casper Labs basically sprung out of that and is the kind of like genetic successor to the Vlad Zamfir proof of stake concept. But so I just wanted to comment quickly on you know, and the reason why all of this is relevant is because Ethereum is probably the most kind of hot choke point for scaling, right? That's why everyone's hot about scaling, because Ethereum is slow, right? And I think, you know, so just to kind of like put a fine point on this from the perspective of scaling, you know, I think Wayne said something interesting about sort of there won't be a world computer. You know, I think that's pretty fair, but I think one of the things that is interesting is instead of a world computer, you know, what we did get is we got a vending machine for securities, you know, in the form of ICO contracts, and it was actually pretty good at that, right? Like, and so I think that there are applications, and I think I'm with you know, Nick Szabo on the smart contract, which is the smart contract is a vending machine. So like, ultimately, the reason why a smart contract is a vending machine is that you're either handling product, which is the output of the vending machine, or you're handling money, which is the input of the vending machine. And if you're spending any lines of code doing anything other than those two things, you should take that code out. That code should not be executing in this slowness. So the only reason why you pay a penalty to run smart contract code and you run it so slow is because you're either handling the money coming in or you're handling product going out. Otherwise, get the code out of the smart contract. It's a waste.
Okay, so the money comes. You want to say something? Right?
Yeah, I just quickly, you asked about, is it hard to find developers?
Yes.
And the answer is yes. And we've been very lucky. We have some wonderful people on our team. I moved to the San Francisco Bay Area to be able to get access to better developers. I started the company, I was living in Hartford, Connecticut, where I was for about 20 years. And ironically, some of the best, you know, we've got guys come over from BitMEX, guys from Purse came over. The people who were into Bitcoin and were passionate about the technology have turned out to be the best performers at Tierion. Some of the other people we have on our team who aren't there anymore, you could kind of say they were older and they had their head in the clouds, meaning like cloud computing. They just didn't understand the new paradigm. And they were always trying to push things towards a more centralized, cloud-based solution when it wasn't always appropriate for what our business goals and what we were trying to do. So even if you could find people with the skills, making sure that everybody is aligned and everybody understands that you're building something that is going to have technical trade-offs based on what you're trying to accomplish as a business, I think can be difficult, especially with more seasoned people who think they understand things better.
Yeah, I would say it's kind of hard to kind of find developers. I mean, we got lucky. We're building on Hyperledger. So if any of you is an Hyperledger developer, see me after.
So I'm going to make a summary of the 10 next questions to finish this panel. No, I love that. I mean, it's you are full of enthusiasm, and so I had a lot of fun reading that Bitcoin scaling problem forced Facebook to create Libra. I think it was a very nice joke. But more seriously, last question is, when do you see a mass adoption coming? And how do you see the blockchain in, let's say, the five years, let's say? So will we have finally people having, using the blockchain with applications or whatever? And how do you see the blockchain?
So let me throw out some dates. So October 31st is an interesting date. Because it's the deadline, and it's a deadline for Telegram, which is if Telegram doesn't ship Telegram token ton in their messenger by October 31st, they need to refund $1.7 billion raised in ICO. So we're going to see Telegram ship in Messenger, whatever code they have. And by the way, like they shipped a pretty big drop into GitHub, and it looks pretty nice. So I think it's going to work. Then We know that Line, which is 560 million registered users in Japan, dominant messenger there, is going to ship by December. We also know that Clayton, which is the blockchain of Kakao Messenger, the dominant messenger in Korea, is also going to ship by the end of the year. As far as the People's Bank of China, with 900 million daily active users of WeChat and Alipay, we're not sure when they're going to ship. Libra, not sure when they're going to ship, but
They have no idea.
correct. But we suspect it will be reasonably soon, right? So I guess, to me, like the way we look at it, I'm wearing my venture capital hat. The way we look at it is it's all going to fit in one runway. So we're deploying capital now because if we drop checks that last for 18 to 24 months, with our co-investors, it's going to happen in that window. So that's our mindset.
I would say just quickly, the question was when is mass adoption going to happen? And I would say that it's already here, in a sense that, when I first got involved in Bitcoin, it was a couple, neckbeards and, all of us hanging out and trying to connect with each other, and not really, there was no commercial adoption. It was very hard to even just buy Bitcoin.
You're taking cash too.
Yeah, it was very difficult. Now, on a regular basis, I see my friends and colleagues on CNBC. Bitcoin is, ICE, which is the company that owns the New York Stock Exchange. Recently, they're an investor or the backer behind something called Backed, which is it's basically an exchange. The idea that some of that would exist 5 years ago would be just unfathomable. And I think that you're going to see continued adoption of Bitcoin. I'm not really sure what's going to happen with Ethereum. I think that it might become interesting financial plumbing. I think it might also evolve technologically to be an interesting sort of complementary application development platform. But I do think that people who are building extranet style systems will be able to set up basically like a federated network of web servers and be able to build these multi-operator software applications. And they will have the word blockchain attached to them. And there's always a lot of work in doing those kinds of things. And I don't think there'll be any dominant platform. I think that there will be, it'll just be like programming languages or web servers or application stacks. I think we'll settle on a handful that will specialize in different things. And eventually we'll stop talking about blockchain and we'll just start talking about software.
Yeah. Basically, I think I agree with that. The consumer side is going to be really interesting, but from my point of view, I think on the, in terms of dealing with some of the largest financial institutions that are out there, there's folks in the room from Santander. There's, I think, digital securities and all sorts of financial transactions are, irreversibly on that path towards maybe, the next 5 years being, behind virtually every new issue.
Locke and then Christian.
Yeah, I think we, are seeing this come in cycles, right? The first big exchange, Mt. Gox, was Magic the Gathering online exchange, right? And Bitcoin went, from $1 to 100 to 10,000 to 20,000, right? And people were saying that's mass adoption. And I think that right now we're solving the problem around payments, and a lot of people are focusing on currencies. But we're going to see other applications where enterprises start using this, for data validation, for more efficient ways of, transferring data. This can the blockchain has the opportunity to kind of create this peer-to-peer network where you actually, don't have to worry about getting a Trojan virus in a file that you're going to download, right? And we're going to see mass adoption as we kind of converge in a way where enterprises are, utilizing this distributed database technology, kind of like the hippie, greenfield people that are pushing for the libertarian, aspects of it as well. And so I think there's going to be a bridge there where we're going to see a lot of efficiencies come from, as we've all been talking about here, different versions of consensus mechanisms and characteristics around these distributed ledgers.
Finally, Christian, and then Pimo.
That's,
Take the
that's
mic.
okay. I'm actually laughing because I'm thinking about, a bunch of guys sitting like us here 30 years ago talking about how, when we're going to have mass adoption of TCP/IP, right? And I think that's the wrong question. The idea is, when Gmail is coming out. And to me, it's less about technology, it's when you're capable to deliver a 10x value in a scalable manner. And I don't know when that is going to become, but it's going to be an application that consumers, right? My mom, my friend, my brother can actually use without even knowing that it's actually using blockchain. So it's definitely going to be anytime soon, I think. It's probably 5 to 10 years out.
Oh, Miko.
Messenger-based payments coming this month.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, panelists. They're really great. I'm sorry that they turned the sound off out there because it was fascinating just for these few minutes I was in here. I have to watch the video. So we're actually, I was wondering if you guys wouldn't mind just sitting in the audience for 3 minutes. We've got Clarence Louis here who's going to actually do a pitch for 3 minutes. His business is Elastos, and we appreciate your attention. Thank you so much.
Great, thanks. Should I move this over? Just over here. Hi, thanks. Great talk, guys. I love that panel. So my name is Clarence Liu. I'm the VP of Development for Elastos. We are one of the top 10 raises of 2018. You might not have heard of us because we're Asia-based, but we raised $60 million in 2018. So I'm not here for money. We actually did something quite amazing. We've actually already acquired about 50% of Bitcoin's hash power. So we have a blockchain platform where we merge mine with Bitcoin. So many of the top mining pools in the world do mine on Elastos. We're a separate blockchain. But we're basically moving on. We've been in development for 2 years, and we're moving to the point where we're actually going to start one of our social experiments, which is we are moving 16 million tokens on chain for the community to decide how to use. So it's interesting. So we have the problem with, I think it's Stellar or EOS, is how to spend money, and we're going to let your votes on the blockchain to figure out how that money is spent. So I'm here to pitch basically that we already have about 12, say, teams around the world. So we already have spent about $500,000 now. And right now we're doing an interim council, which is we're trialing it out, trying to set up the constitution, figuring out what the rules are on spending this. But as of 2020, the constitution will be encoded on chain, and then you'll be able to on-chain natively create a smart contract to say, I want to propose to start a community. We already had this happen, so we now have communities all over the world, like in Hong Kong, Bitburg, in Singapore, in India, where communities already started. We've been funding them. We've been funding projects for between $25,000 to $100,000. So, especially from the Brazilian guys, if you want to start a community there, or you know projects that are looking for funding, it's completely grant funding. We don't want any equity. We're basically a charitable organization. So business cards out there, and then with brochures out there. Cyberpublic.org is the website. You can go there and see right now. There are tons of suggestions that people are putting up. Everything from an OTC swapping pool to DApps to starting communities in regions all over the world. And we have a proposal system. You can see where the money's going. It's all transparent. It's all on-chain. But Elastos itself, we are very quickly in development. We're almost done. Probably end of October, we'll be launched the Ethereum sidechain. So we have this Ethereum-based blockchain, and then we also have the on-chain on-chain funding system happening in 2020. Okay, thank you.
Don't rush it. Don't pull it down.
Sorry?
Don't let what happened to the DAO happen to you guys.
I think it's, honestly, out of the Chinese side of thing, they are actually very aggressive on just trying out this social experiment. On-chain, they've encoded a 10% max spend per year of the 16 million tokens, but we'll just really see how that goes.
That's awesome.
Yes, but it's been pretty cool. We've already had some really good projects up there on that website.
Thanks.
Thanks so much, Clarence. And if you'd like to speak to him further after this, go for it. We've got like half an hour networking. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Nice meeting you. I'm gonna actually listen back. I got a 3-year-old. And,